Okay, bear with me. I've never done this before. Typically, when I'm recording my podcast episode, I'm just recording audio and then I don't have to worry about matching up the video and all that stuff. So hopefully this goes all right. But I think this is important to cover. My idea for one of my next podcast episodes, which would be this podcast episode, is to talk about my experience having a stroke, recovering, and then what life has been like. I suppose we'll just jump in. This is my way of just kind of processing and getting it out, and some kind of, I don't know. I kind of think of it as closure, and maybe other people will find this interesting. Maybe they're curious what. I know I've gotten a lot of questions about what my experience was like, what caused the stroke, all of that kind of stuff, and yeah. So this is my chance to kind of answer those questions. I think. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments. But yeah, I'm going to try to just walk through everything as much as I can. So we'll just get going. In October of 2023, my wife and I got married. So we're coming up on 2 years of marriage. Less than a month later, November 11th, I had a stroke. And so what happened was we were just coming back from visiting our in-laws, visiting her parents, and we drove into town. And we got back to our apartment. We brought our bags up to our apartment. And I remember I set my duffel bag down on the ground and I stood up and I got that head rush feeling. And like my head started to feel a little fuzzy and I was like, whoa, okay, well, I've experienced this before. I'll just sit, or I'll stand next to the counter and the kitchen counter and just wait for it to pass. And so I stood leaning against the kitchen counter for a couple minutes and it wasn't going away. It just continued. It didn't get any worse. It just kind of just felt like that remained the same. After a couple minutes, the right side of my face started feeling a little heavy. And I thought back in like high school, I think it was. My mom had called me in. So back when I was, a youth living with my parents, my mom was watching TV one time and she called me into the living room and she said, "Hey, is the side of my face drooping? I might be like, am I having a stroke?" And at the time I looked at her and I was like, "No, you're fine." She was fine. But knowing like, oh, my face is drooping, that's a sign of a stroke. Okay. So my face feels heavy, or at least the right side of my face feels heavy. Maybe I'm having a stroke. So my wife was off, I think unpacking some stuff. And so I called her back into the kitchen and I said, "Hey, so just so you know, here's what happened. My head feels kind of funny. My face feels a little droopy. Does it look okay? I might be having a stroke. If I pass out, now you know what to tell the doctors." And she looked at me and she said, "No, you look okay for now. So we're going to monitor that. You tell me if it gets any worse." I said, "Okay." So she went off and did her thing and kept unpacking or whatever she was doing. In the meantime, I walked over to our Nespresso machine and popped in an espresso capsule. I was going to have some coffee. This was like 9 or 10 at night. I'm a coffee hobbyist. I really enjoy drinking coffee. It doesn't seem to keep me up late at night. So, and this is important for the story. I mention it because it is important. And so after another couple minutes went by and I started feeling a little dizzy, I started kind of losing my balance, stumbling around like as if I was really drunk is what I imagine it was like. I've never been so drunk I couldn't walk. So I don't know, but that's what I imagine it kind of felt like. I just was losing my balance. Started slurring my speech. Actually, that was a pretty clear sign something is wrong. And so at that point, and my wife was kind of on high alert because I don't get headaches. I don't get headaches. And so she knew if Jason's having a headache, then something is wrong. And so when I started stumbling around and slurring my speech, then she's like, "All right, we're going to the ER right now. We're going to the hospital." And I said, "Oh, wait, my coffee." And so I walk over, and I had pulled the shot of espresso into a tumbler. I put the lid on, and it's a lid that like it fully seals, but it also like can lock open. And so I locked it open. Again, that's important to the story. Grab my tumbler. We grab like wallet, keys, all that kind of stuff, and start walking back down to our car. And at the time, we lived on the third floor of this apartment. So we went down, and there was no elevator. So we went to the staircase, started going down on between the third and the second floor. So I was carrying I apologize. This is like amateur hour. So it was the left side of my face felt heavy, felt droopy. And I do remember that it must have been my left side, because I had troubles with the left side of my body a little later on. So I apologize. Amateur hour. Again, I suck at this. But we were walking down the stairs. I had my tumbler in my left hand. It was so bad. So I had my right arm slung over my wife's shoulders, and she was carrying me down the stairs. And my tumbler in my left hand, it was open again. And we get to the first landing. We turn the corner, and we're about to go down the steps, and the tumbler slips out of my hand. Like I just one second it's there, and the other second it's not. I couldn't even tell. But my hand had lost strength to where the tumbler slid out of my hand and fell down the stairs. It spilled a little bit of coffee. That's the important part. It was open, spilled a little bit of the coffee, and I went, my coffee. And my wife was like, yeah, whatever. Shut up about your coffee. We need to go to the hospital. That was probably the most distressing piece of the whole experience for me. Certainly not for my wife. So we get down to the ground floor of our apartment. We get out into the car. My wife helps me get in, and I apparently am like sitting on my left arm. So this is the left arm part. So I'm like sitting on my hand, like my left hand under my left thigh, and my wife gets in the car, and I'm like, honey, where's my left arm? Like, where's my arm? I can't, what? Like, I've lost my arm, basically. I couldn't feel it at all. And she looks over and she goes, you're sitting on it. And so I like look down and I go, I can't really do this. Here, let me set the microphone down. I go like, there we go. So I grab my left arm with my right arm and sling it back into my lap. Like, okay, cool. I've got my arm back. That's awesome. There's an urgent care just a couple blocks away from our apartment. So I tried to give her directions, like get out into the main street, take a right, take a left. I'm like doing my best to recall where this thing is. Giving directions to your spouse while you're having a stroke, not the easiest thing to do, but I tried my best. And so we get there, and it's not like, so it's an urgent care, but it's not like a late night emergency room thing. And so it was closed at this hour of the night. And so my wife gets out and checks. She goes up to the door. It's locked. Nobody's there. She comes back out. I say, okay, there's a hospital, like an actual ER just down the street. So let's go there. So we go over there. Sure enough, like all the lights are on. It's very clear. Like people are there. And so my wife goes in, and she told me later. So she walks in and she says, I need a wheelchair. I think my husband's having a stroke. And so she gets a wheelchair, comes outside and, helps me get into the wheelchair. And some of the medical staff come out, and they all wheel me inside and bring me to one of the exam rooms or whatever. And so they look at my face, they test my the strength in my hands, like all that kind of stuff to see which side is weaker. And so then they start explaining, they go through like all my medical, it's like, are you still working here? Is this still your primary contact? Like, do you want to update at this time? Like, so my wife and I had been married less than a month. So we had to update like, no, she's my primary contact, not one of my parents. That was fun. And they explain what's going to happen. They're like, all right, we're going to give you this, what we call the clot buster. So a very powerful blood thinner that's going to break up the clot in your brain. And it's a good thing you guys got in early, got in right away so that there's not too much damage. done. So they're explaining all this. And then while in the moments where they're like not talking to us, addressing us about what's going to happen, they're like checking the records and they're talking to each other or whatever. And I like look at my wife and I go, don't worry, honey. It's going to be okay. We have life insurance in place. So if anything happens, we're covered. And then I realize, oh crap, we don't have our wills notarized yet. So of course, that's part of how I think is like life insurance and wills in a medical emergency. Like, do we have the necessary things in place? And my wife laughed about that later on. And of course, in the moment, she's just like, shut up, stop talking about that. We're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And later on, she's like, of course, Jason thinks about life insurance and wills when he's potentially going to die. And so they give me the clot buster, and then they said, well, so it was a heart hospital that we went to. They have the main hospital in a different part of town. So they said, here, we're going to get the ambulance and load you up, and then we'll send you over to the main hospital. And they like turned to my wife and said, do you want to ride with him in the ambulance, or do you want to just follow along in your own car? And she said, I'll follow along in my own car. And so we get over to the hospital, and they get me set up in a room. And yeah, that's the main part of it. So then the first couple hours or so, hour or two maybe, were people coming in and checking on me and making sure I was okay and that the clot buster was working, checking symptoms to see if like my face was improving at all. The neurologist came in and talked about things. They did an MRI of my neck and head, trying to see what happened. So when the neurologist came in, he had asked, like, did you do anything? Is there anything that might have triggered this? And I said, well, I do occasionally self-adjust my neck. So just like this, like, you put your hand on your chin and crack it to the side. And he looked at me and he's like, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that anymore. So they can't say conclusively that caused a stroke, but the MRI revealed that some of the blood vessels in my neck have been damaged. And so they said it is probably because you self-adjust your neck. It's because you push your neck too far, farther than just like, you can turn your head and there's a natural range of movement, but if you push it with your hand, you're pushing it further than the natural range of movement, and that's going to cause problems. So my neurologist said, don't do that. So now I tell people, if you do that, please stop unless you want to have a stroke, maybe. So first, let's see. My wife goes back to our apartment, gets some clothes and whatnot, and I think we spend the night in the hospital. She sleeps on the couch in the room. I'm obviously sleeping in the hospital bed. Bed rest for this guy for 24 hours while that clot buster works and then wears off, because they said, like, this thing is so powerful that if you're walking around, like if you go to the bathroom, if you're walking around and you trip and fall, you can bleed out internally and you'll die. So bed rest, you can't do anything. That kind of sucked for 24 hours. Wasn't really a big deal that night because I just wanted to go to bed. I was tired. But the next day, when I had to stay in my hospital bed all day, that sucked. At some point, I think it was that night, my wife and I worked at the same company, and she just messaged my boss over the, internal communication thing. And she said, hey, here's what happened with Jason. Yeah, Jason's not going to be into work on Monday. We're going to be in the hospital. She explained what happened, and they then like announced it to our teams, and everybody was very supportive. Really appreciate that. So while we were in the hospital, I just kept myself busy, whatever, watching YouTube videos, reading, passing the time. There wasn't a lot to do. When I was finally able to get up and walk, my wife and I would walk around the unit. We'd go down into the lobby and kind of walk around a little bit, got some food. My boss came and visited. He had texted me and he asked, like, hey, is it okay if we come visit? And I said, yeah, of course. That's, I think, visiting hours here, come, here's my room number, come visit, whatever. And he said, is there anything we can do to help? And I said, actually, since you're asking, I could really go for some double stuffed Oreos. I've really been craving Oreos. And he said, got it. And so sure enough, he brought a pack of double stuffed Oreos to the hospital room. And so he said it was really nice to feel like I could help in some way. Oftentimes, when a loved one is experiencing some kind of medical emergency, you just say like, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And there's really not a lot you can do to help. Like, unless you can work a miracle, you can't really do much. And so he said it was really nice to know that there was like just even a little thing that I could do to help. And so love those Oreos. That was great. Another friend of ours, a coworker and my wife's friend, brought a chocolate chip cookie cake. And that was awesome because we had to celebrate our 1 month anniversary in my hospital room. So not exactly the anniversary that one might expect or hope for. And then as well, people were joking, like, man, you're really taking this like in sickness and in health thing really seriously. You're doing getting the in sickness part out of the way right away. So it was fun to joke along. After it was clear like things are going to be okay, like the clot is broken up, I'm not going to die, all that kind of stuff. It was really easy to be in good spirits because it's just a matter of time. Like, hey, I'll just give it a couple days. I will get kind of back to normal, get discharged, all that stuff. Also, along with my boss bringing double stuffed Oreos, our CEO and VP of operations, two guys who I've talked with. We're not like best buddies or anything, but like we talk occasionally at the office, and they both came and visited together. They asked how it went, or like how the stroke happened, how's it going, all that kind of stuff. And the CEO again said the same thing, like, well, let us know if there's anything we can do to help. And at that point I was like, well, if you're asking, I could really go for a plain latte right now. And so he pulls out his phone, he goes, done. And he DoorDashes a Starbucks latte to the hospital for me. I will never forget that latte. That was very nice of him. Very nice of him. I really appreciate that. Gonna check my notes. So I do have a little bit of an outline to make sure I kind of stay somewhat coherent. Kind of challenging for a stroke victim these days. Okay, so that's Saturday night, the November 11th of 2023. November 14th, I get discharged. They had come in and they tested. They put both their hands on put their hands on both my feet, and they're like, all right, I'm going to push one way, I'm going to pull, you try to resist me. And they were just testing my strength. They would like, all right, look at me and smile and like make sure my face still looked okay and it was even and whatnot. They gave me some cognitive tests, like, all right, I'm going to give you a list of 5 numbers, and then I'll ask you like where we're at and what's your name. And then I'm going to ask you to repeat those numbers back to me, things like that. And I passed their tests. Occupational therapist came in. I had to go like walk up and down some stairs and all that stuff, make sure that I could prove that I could take care of myself if I was discharged. So that part was easy peasy. Finally get discharged, go home. I'm on short-term disability for, I think it was either a week or 2. Doesn't really matter. Short-term disability, at least a week. So I'm still collecting a paycheck, or part of a paycheck. After about a week after getting out of the hospital, I go have a checkup with my primary care physician, and he's the one who like consults with me and asks how I'm feeling. And then he's the one, if I need more time off from work, he would write the doctor's note. I send that to the insurance company, and they, extend my short-term disability. I think it was a week or 2 after. Again, doesn't really matter. My wife and I go for my checkup, and after the checkup, we were planning on getting groceries. And so I go to the checkup, do the thing, talk with my primary care physician. I think I was waiting to get a lab done. So I meet with the physician, then I go back out into the waiting room, wait for a lab kind of thing. I was texting our VP of operations again, and he had asked like, what's the plan for the day? Just checking in, seeing if I was still kind of staying active or just whatever. And I said, yeah, we're at the checkout, or we're at the checkup, and we're going to go get groceries after this. I mentioned that because that was a huge deal. That was the first time since I got discharged that I could actually remember something, that I could actually like, so up for the week or 2 following my discharge, my wife and I would make plans like, all right, we're going to go go to church and then go get groceries. And then we're going to see this person, or this person's coming over, whatever. Like, I kept forgetting. I couldn't remember a thing. Like, then my wife would remind me, like, oh yeah, this person's coming over tonight, remember? And I'd be like, oh yeah. Yeah, I remember you saying that, but I had forgotten. Or like, oh, we have to go to this place, and then we have to go to this place. Do you remember? No, I forgot. But thank you for reminding me. So my wife, there was a burden on her to like keep reminding me things. So texting the VP, we're gonna go to the checkup, and then I remember I leaned over, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, don't forget we have to go get groceries after this. And I was like, holy crap, did I just remember something? That, like, praise God. Oh my gosh. So I was texting the VP and I told him, like, this is incredible. First time I remember something. And so that was good. That was a part of the healing process. I could still tell something was wrong. I couldn't think like I used to. It's kind of like my head felt kind of fuzzy. It's kind of like if you're buzzed while drinking, it's like you know what's happening and you still have a decent sense of what's going on around you, but it kind of feels like it's maybe a dream. Yeah, it's just not fully lucid, but it's lucid enough, but not fully there. And so I could tell like things are not normal. I'm not thinking the way I used to. Even a couple weeks after, I could tell I'm just like, it just felt like something was missing. And it's like I wasn't myself. For the friends and family who were saying, like, man, you're really taking this in sickness and in health thing, like, seriously, you're doing it right away. That's good. I recently heard a news story. This is from a long time ago, but a couple just got married and they were like at the airport to go on their honeymoon, and the husband forgets like his wallet in the car. So he goes back and then he like never returns. And turns out he somehow, I'm still kind of unclear on what happened, but like got amnesia, forgot where he was, and wandered off. And they found him and they got him back home, but he like completely forgot. He's like not only did he forget who his wife was, he forgot what a wife is. She came into a hospital room and no visual signal that he recognized her at all. And she said, do you know who I am? He said, no. She said, I'm your wife. And he goes, what's a wife? Like he didn't even know what his mother was, like what a mother is, which is just wild. And so in an interview, she said, well, we said for better or worse, and I guess the worst just came first. The worst just came before the better. And when I heard that, so that was a couple weeks ago from today that I heard that, and I was just like, that sounds familiar. That's our story. So fortunately, it turned out really well for my wife and I. My wife very quickly could have gone from, lifelong partner to lifelong caretaker. Had we, while we were in the hospital, they even said, we're really glad you came in immediately, because most young people, if they have a stroke, they have this headache and they think, well, I'm just going to sleep it off. I'm going to go to bed, sleep it off. Pain will be gone in the morning. And then they don't wake up because the loss of blood to their brain kills them. And so it's really good that you came in early. And fortunately, this is not the case with most people who have strokes. I have not had any like lingering effects. I didn't experience any major brain damage. No long-term brain damage that I can tell. So I go back to work. I try to get back to my job. So I'm a software developer. I have features to implement and features to create and web pages to design or whatever. And I had a couple people, my boss included, tell me and encourage me like, hey, you might not be able to produce the same level of output that you're used to. And it's okay to take it easy. Do what you can. And we're not expecting you to immediately be back to where you were before you had this stroke. Just take your time. Like, so they were very understanding. I really appreciate that. But I was determined. I was like, I'm going to recover as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And I'm going to get this work done. And I noticed it was really hard for me to hold like all the data. So like we got data coming in from the back end, we got to display it on the website, the front end. And it was really hard for me compared to what I was used to think about all this data coming in and think about it in my head, just like hold it in my memory and think about what the data looks like and what the data what attributes are on the data and all that stuff. And so I just knew this is not normal. Like I'm not okay. I'm not back to normal. This is frustrating. It just feels like something's missing. Like I'm working with one hand tied behind my back, mentally speaking. And so it sucked. It was really frustrating. I noticed that I just couldn't do things the way I used to be able to. Now, fortunately for me, one of my coworkers, one of my teammates, he had an aneurysm a year or two before this. And so, and he made a full recovery. So that's, praise God for that. But he suffered a brain injury. I suffered a brain injury. I talked to him at work and I was like, hey, how long did it take you to feel like you were back to normal? Because it's been a couple weeks and this sucks. And so he talked about his experience. He's like, yeah, I think it was probably a couple of months before I kind of felt back to normal. And it's just part of the process. But it'll come back. It'll come back. Don't worry, buddy. And so that was good to know. At least somebody had gone. Granted, his was a bit more extreme than mine, but similar-ish experiences. And so it was nice to have somebody who could tell me, like, yeah, I felt that way too. I certainly felt like I couldn't do what I used to be able to do. And especially somebody in the same, like, we were on the same team. We basically did the same job, him just at a higher level than me. So it was really nice to hear from somebody who could kind of relate, kind of be like, yep, I get it. Everybody experiences cognitive decline eventually. It's just you and I are kind of experiencing it earlier rather than later. And so now we have a taste of what to expect when we're old. It was nice to have somebody who could kind of relate, but it still wasn't like he had his own journey and he knew what happened for him, but it felt like nobody, not even him and not my wife, could communicate like, I get it. I understand. I know what it is you've lost. And that was really hard. When I told people, like, something's not right, it feels like something's missing, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's really hard. I'm sorry to hear that, which was really nice. I appreciate that. But nobody could actually grasp, I get it. I know. It's like if you lose a parent, like my mother dies or my father dies, and somebody says, hey, I know what it's like. I've lost my mother. I've lost my father. It's like, okay, you kind of get it. And like with certain nuances, like my parent is different than yours, but you get it. And it just felt like I didn't have that in its entirety. I didn't have that to its fullness. And so it just, still felt things were wrong. I was having a conversation with another coworker at one point, and he thought, he asked me, like, do you feel like you've come back a little too soon to work, that you're taking on too much by being back here at work? Maybe you should. And he wasn't trying to be rude about it by any means, just genuinely concerned for my well-being. Like, hey, I see the frustration that you're not doing what you used to, and like maybe you need to spend a little bit more time walking before you try to run. Maybe you need to spend a little more time in recovery before you come back and expect the same level of work and output from yourself that you used to be able to do. I thought that was a fair point. I think I stuck with it, kept coming back to work. So in this time, I was talking with my wife and I said, I think I want to go back to therapy to have a professional walk with me through this grieving process. Like I could tell, like I'm grieving the loss of brain function, and I've never grieved before. So it'd be nice to have a professional to walk with me as I kind of figure out my mental health right now. And she said, okay, I think that would be good. So I start seeing a therapist, and one of the first things we talk about like, I've never grieved before, I'm grieving. She helped me name that as well. And so she explained like, hey, here are the stages of grief, and grief is not linear. It's not just like the anger and denial or like all that kind of, I don't remember what order they're in, but it's not like you go from one, then to the next, and then you work your way through all of them and then you're done. That's not how it goes. Sometimes you might work through the first couple, like you'll experience the first 3 and then go back to 1, and then you'll go to 4 and then 2, and then like it kind of just comes and goes. And she told me about sneaky grief, and sometimes there are going to be moments where just out of the blue something happens and I'm like, hit with like, I'm grieving, I'm sad kind of thing. And she said, hey, heads up, it's different for everybody, but this might happen for you. So I really appreciated that. One of the first things we talked about in our therapy sessions was how I would tell people, like people kind of that I knew, or people at work, or people, I don't know, in the community that I was seeing, like nurses at my checkups or whatever. I would tell them like, yeah, I had a stroke and I feel like I'm on the road to recovery. And they would say, well, you look really good. And in my head, I would be like, well, I wish I felt good. I didn't say that because I really appreciated their thought. They were very nice. They were being very nice. They were doing the best they can. Like, they probably just don't know how to, I don't know, how often do you encounter a stroke victim who's like made a full recovery, all that kind of stuff. And that's like, for a lot of stroke victims, that's a very real thing, is that like they, the part of their face is left kind of paralyzed by the stroke, and it never returns to normal. So I get where they were coming from. It was very nice. But it wasn't what I needed. And so that was tough. I talked about that with my therapist, and I said, I've got these people, like I've experienced this a couple times. People say, well, you look good. I just want to scream, I wish I felt good, because I don't feel like normal. And so we talked about that. I was still really, really frustrated that I couldn't do what I used to be able to do. I remember it was tough on my wife. I mentioned that she had to keep reminding me of things. And I remember one morning, I think we were getting ready for church, and I was going to make her coffee. While she did her makeup, I was making her coffee. She was getting ready for the day, getting ready for church. And I pulled a shot of espresso, and then I walked over to like where we had our caramel sauce and chocolate sauce and all that stuff. And I couldn't remember what order she wanted that in. Like, I can't remember. It is escaping me how to make this coffee. Like, I just can't think of it. And so I like grabbed the cup of coffee that I had, and I walk over to the bathroom door, and I'm like, I can't remember how to make your coffee. Sad. And yeah, it must have been kind of like sad, like a sad puppy, kind of just to see, I'm trying to do this good thing. I can't remember how to do it. And so she gently just reminded me how to, like, yeah, it's this one and then that one and whatever. But yeah, I was really wrestling with like, something is not right. I'm not normal. And then she was wrestling with like, she has to keep reminding me things, and she like, he just has to be a little bit more of a caretaker than what she used to need to do or whatever. My personal struggle. So I said I was very frustrated not being able to like do what I used to do, not being able to think the way I used to think, to problem solve the way I used to think about these big amounts of data the way I used to, like with work. And so I was really angry with God. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed day after day, just like, God, please just give me my brain back. I'm really tired of not being normal, not being the way I used to. Just like, please give me my brain back. And it was day after day. And I wrestled with the thoughts of like, am I allowed to be mad at God? I'm pretty mad. I'm pretty angry right now. I talked about that with my therapist, and she told me like, well, if you think you're not allowed to be mad at God, that's called spiritual bypass. I would encourage you not to engage in that, because that just repressing your emotions for this like spiritual factor of well, this isn't right. This isn't good according to my spiritual beliefs. She said that's not healthy ultimately. Like, it's better for you to express those emotions. And so I wrestled with that a little bit. I thought, you know what? God is big enough to handle my honesty. Just because I'm mad at God doesn't mean he's offended. It doesn't mean that he's somehow weaker. Doesn't mean he's inadequate or anything. It means I'm just really struggling. And God's big enough to handle that. God's big enough. Like, just like you have a 3-year-old little girl, like, beating on the chest of her father, like, mad that she can't play with her toys or hang out with her friends. Like, my Heavenly Father is big enough to handle my anger. And so I told him, I said, like, I'm mad, I'm angry. I allowed myself to feel the emotions and to be sad, to be angry. Days went by, and the couple weeks after I went home, I tried going back to work, tried returning to normal life. And in the morning, when I would spend time with God, I would pray and pray and pray. I would listen to worship music about how God is in control, and how, God has a plan for this kind of thing. And I knew he did, but I didn't see it. I was praying and I was praying, and so one morning I was really like, God, I'm pissed off. And I was like, just give me my brain. Just give me my brain back. And I screamed at him and I said, just give me my brain back! God damn it! And I just had to trust that God is big enough to handle that. And he is. And he is. And he was. And he has been. But I screamed at God. And then I wept. And I just cried because it didn't feel like I was making progress. And with the people being nice and telling me, you look good. I wish I felt good. I wish I had my brain back. I just wish I could do what I used to do. It was tough. It was really hard. But it was all part of the process. Just letting myself feel the emotions and go through the experience, and just, everybody grieves differently. And mine involved a lot of anger because it felt like I was robbed of something I used to be able to do, something that, I need this for my job. What if I'm not able to do my job anymore? That was a very real fear for me. And that was a conversation I had with my bosses. I had 2 bosses at the time. And what if I can't return to normal? What if I can't produce the same kind of work that I used to? And I talked with my career coach at the time. In the company, we have career coaches. I've mentioned that in episode 1 of my podcast. I knew our company was people-focused enough to where I wouldn't lose my job. I would maybe have to take on a different role if if I really couldn't do my work and do what the role required. But I knew my bosses would be very understanding and try to work with me before we reached that point. So I just gave myself permission to be sad and to go through the waves, ride the waves of grief, and just day by day try to stay positive and trust that God knows what he's doing. So things started slowly returning to normal. I got back to work. I started producing, started ramping back up to the same level of output that I had been producing at work. And I remember I had a one-on-one with my boss, which we had one every month or so. And I was telling him, I think I'm on the up and up. Okay. I'm getting there. But this stupid stroke, it keeps making me forget things. I forget people's names. I forget places. I forget the things I used to remember. And he reminded me, well, how much of that is the stroke and how much of it is just normal cognitive functioning? Because people forget people's names all the time. People forget the names of places all the time. So how can you tell the difference between this is caused by the stroke and this is just normal brain functioning, whatever. I thought that was really, like, that was something I needed to hear, because I was blaming like everything on the stroke. Like every single deficit, even all the understandable ones, like I can't remember that person's name. I haven't seen this person in a month. I can't remember their name. Like, that just happens. That's just normal life. And I was still blaming it on the stroke. Like, if I hadn't had this stroke, I would be able to remember. Well, that's not doing me any good. That's just kind of blaming myself. It's not really helpful, especially when it's just, again, normal cognitive functioning. It happens all the time. So I needed to hear that. I started slowly, about maybe a month after I got discharged, started recognizing little idiosyncrasies that I used to do. And so like so if you've ever played the game in the car, I think it's called Padiddle. At least that's what my wife and I call it. You drive through like a yellow light, hit the ceiling of the car, or you see a car with a headlight out, hit the ceiling of the car. And the last one to hit the ceiling is like a loser or whatever. And I found myself, I would drive to work and I'd go through like yellow lights and I would instinctively hit the ceiling of the car. And it, like, at the time, the first couple times I did it, I was like, why am I doing that? Why do I do that? And then I remembered, like, oh yeah, this is a game we play with each other, and this is a game I play with my wife. And so it's just, I can't remember where it came from, but I just do it. And so recognizing, like, making these connections is probably helping my brain heal. So I'm going to keep looking out for these connections that I'm making. And even if they seem insignificant, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to celebrate that. I'm going to call attention to it, in my own brain, just be like, hey, I remembered that. That's amazing. So coming into the final stretch, sorry, it's been a lot. There's a lot to go through, and some of the thoughts are a little jumbled. So I was fed up with work. There was one day that was particularly draining. It just felt like I was trudging through mud all day, like really hard mental stuff, like a very heavy cognitive load with the work I was doing that day. And I decided to call, so my former professor of computer science back in undergrad, he had since left the college, come to work for our company as the director of analytics. And so I called him over Microsoft Teams and talked to him a little bit, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And so I explained, here's like my grief. I just can't do what I used to do. Work is really hard. It gets kind of heavy sometimes, and it didn't used to be like this, and I'm pissed about that. And so very, like I mentioned earlier, it felt like nobody could relate to what I had lost, to what I experienced. And he told me, like, I understand how frustrating that is. Jason, as your, so he was a former professor, former academic advisor as well. He said, Jason, after working with you in college, like seeing your work ethic, seeing the level of work you produce, you were used to operating at a higher level than a lot of people, and used to operating at a higher level than you are now. And I get it. I understand how frustrating that might be. And it felt like finally, like I started tearing up. It felt like finally somebody gets it. Somebody is able to say, I know what it is that you've lost, and I'm sorry. And for once, like somebody was able to relate. And that was really nice. I didn't know I needed that at the time, but I did. And so that was a blessing. So then once I recognized, like, holy crap, you spoke to my soul. Like a day or two later, I like messaged him and I said, hey, what you said was exactly what I needed to hear. So thank you. Thank you for that. And so after that, I started, at this point, I was already thinking about switching careers from software development into something else. I eventually settled on, like, or decided upon grad school counseling. I'm going to go back, get my master's degree in counseling and be a therapist. And so I went to, like, I wrote my letter of intent or whatever it's called, and got the references and applied and got invited to a group interview. And one of the questions, I mentioned this in group or in, I think it was episode 2 of my podcast. I mentioned the grad school interview process, and they had said, we all go through challenges. What's a challenge you've gone through, and what are some of the ways that you've gotten through them? And so I had, like, a couple people answered, and then I started talking, and I said, I feel like the last couple months, this was in April, so about 6 months after the stroke or so, 5 months or whatever it is. And I said, I feel like the last couple months have just been the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life, followed by the new hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life, followed by the new hardest thing I've ever gone through. So it's like hardest thing after new hardest thing after new hardest thing for the last couple months. It sucked. And that all started with my stroke. And so I told the story of my stroke and how I feel like I had recovered. And, I just, man, the stories of resilience, the grad schools just eat those up. And so fortunately, I am very grateful, very, very grateful. I got into the program. Some of the professors who were moderating the group I was in was like, oh, resilience, like that's a huge protective factor. That's, kind of basically it's like, that's something we're looking for. It's like grad school is pretty difficult. We need people who are resilient. So ding, like good. So I'm very grateful I got in to the program. It wasn't just that story. So it was not just that story. Like on no part of my own was it like me getting into grad school. It's just like, I'm just deciding one day at a time. I'm just going to keep doing my best, try to, I don't know, hopefully things improve. I'm going to try to keep living my life, and hopefully things are going to get better. And part of that is resilience. Like that is one picture of resilience. It's just one day at a time. Just going to keep putting the next, like, one foot in front of the other. Going to let my recovery take its course. And so it's been just over an hour. We're just crossing the hour mark. So where am I at now? It has been almost 2 years after the stroke. That'll be this November 2025. Where am I at now? I would say I'm fully recovered. I've said that for a long time. And especially thank you to my boss who pointed out, like, how do you differentiate between stroke-related things, deficits, and just normal deficits? Like nowadays when I point out to people, they ask me, like, do you feel like you've recovered? I say, yeah. I mean, every now and then I forget what's on my grocery list. I forget the name of this person I haven't seen in a long time. But that's just normal stuff. That's normal human functioning. So yeah, I'm recovered, and I just forget things occasionally. So I found this to be super helpful with work. Like when I was returning to work, I had to write things down more often. I mentioned I had a hard time holding like large data sets in my head. And so I just kind of have to like sketch them out, like a rough, like, here's kind of what the data looks like. It's this attribute and that attribute and whatever. I would have to like write it down, write a lot more stuff down than I was used to. All the stuff I used to be able to do in my head, I had to write it down. And so like I write stuff down way more than I used to, still do. It is a cheat code for life, is just writing stuff down. You can't see it. I've got a bunch of sticky notes over here on the wall with different ideas that I don't want to forget. Note to self, all that kind of stuff. I write down everything these days, and I think it has changed so much about the ideas I have, the way I process what's happening in the world, and the ideas that I need to circle back to, all of that kind of stuff. Cheat code for life, can't recommend it enough. And so I've recovered. I write things down. I would say I think probably the way I used to. And in fact, I think I probably think even better now than I did before. Praise God. Definitely couldn't have said that within the first 6 months of having the stroke. But I think it's because when I had the stroke early on, I would often go off on tangents in like conversation, go off on a tangent, and then I would often just find myself like, how did we get on that? Why did I bring that up? I don't remember. And I would do that kind of like quite often before the stroke too. It just have, again, normal brain functioning. go off on a conversational tangent, can't wrap it back into the main thing. And so I had to work really hard post stroke. I worked really hard. Like, I want to stop doing that, or at least I want to get better at that. Of like, if I go on a tangent, I want to make sure where did I come from? Why did I bring this up, and wrap it back into the conversation? I actually got a lot better at it because I was working hard at that. So I think that's one aspect. I think better than I used to. I'm much better at making connections. Recognizing patterns, like just recognizing the little idiosyncrasies and stuff, like the hitting the ceiling of the car, like recognizing those patterns and stuff. I'd say I'm probably better at that now than I used to be because I worked hard at it, where it was part of my recovery work. And yeah, so I think life is back to normal, has been for a while, fortunately. It is still funny bringing up I had a stroke and I'm a stroke survivor, if you want to use that terminology. I very affectionately and very frequently refer to myself as stroke boy. So when I have a good idea or I remember something, I go, stroke boy does it again. So, like I'm some kind of sidekick. I probably do not strike somebody upon first glance as like, I have had a stroke. And so it's kind of funny. I remember telling my boss over the summer that I had a stroke, and she goes like, what? Are you serious? I'm like, oh yeah. Like, one of my classmates was nearby who knew about the stroke. And I was like, she doesn't know about the stroke yet. Kind of funny. So I tell her the story and all that stuff. And I remember like one time in a therapy session, I had just gotten this tattoo, and it was my first like visible tattoo. I've got like another tattoo down here. I've got a couple on my back. I've got one on my side. But they're all like under my clothing. And so she asks like, is this your first tattoo? My therapist, is this your first tattoo? And I'm like, oh no, this is like number 5 or whatever it is. And she said, huh, okay. You don't strike me like, you don't look like somebody who would have a tattoo. And I said, yeah, well, I don't look like a stroke victim either. So thanks. And it's just, it's been, again, like, I recognize my story is not like most people's stories. And so I'm not going to joke about other people having strokes, but this is my story and I get to joke about it. My wife and I, so that November we had a Friendsgiving. We invited people from our church small group over, about 12 to 15 people in our apartment. And we were playing this game, Conversations for Humans. It's a card deck from Dr. John Deloney. And one of the cards, we were reading off these cards and people were giving their answers. One of them was what is something that wasn't funny in the moment, but now that you look back on it, you can laugh. And immediately, I was in the kitchen. Everybody else was in the living room. Immediately, I just yell, my stroke! I start laughing. It was very obvious that everybody was just like, are we allowed to laugh at that? And so I get to have fun with it. It's probably going to be my lifelong excuse. I don't actually use it as like an excuse or crutch for something I can't do. It's like, no, I just failed at that thing or whatever. I made a mistake, whatever. But I always do, like my wife, when she says like, you forgot this thing on our grocery list. Like, why did you do that? Like, well, I had a stroke, so can you blame me? Just a couple weeks ago, my classmate and I were doing some classwork together. And she said, Jason, remind me before we leave, we were on campus, before we leave campus that I have some food in the fridge that I don't want to leave here. And I said, you're asking the stroke victim to help you remember something? Not a good idea. So I get to make little jokes about it. And it's fun. It's fine. I try to be a good sport about it. I would like to think I'm a good sport about it. So I would say I recognize other people have much different stories than I do. But this is my story, and I get to have some fun with it. I get to talk about it the way I want. And I'm very grateful, very, very grateful to all of the support that I've gotten from friends and family, for God, for grateful to God for helping me recover. And I'm very grateful to be where I'm at. I think if you had told me like 5 years ago, like, hey, so you are going to get married, and then a month after that, you're going to have a stroke, and then you're going to recover, and then you're going to switch careers and go into counseling, go to grad school, write a book, start making content or whatever, I would have said like, dang, dude, whatever you're smoking must be some really good stuff, because that is certifiable loony bin. Like, that's crazy. Not going to happen. But that's the path that God had for me, and it's pretty amazing. I'm just blown away. So, all right, 70 minutes. This video has been long enough. I'm going to probably cut out some of the camera shutting off stuff, but other than that, it's probably just going to be pretty raw and unedited, unfiltered. If you've listened this long, holy cow, you're a real one. Thank you so much. Sitting through 70 minutes of the stroke victim rambling, stroke boy rambling. Maybe we'll get some merch. We're not getting merch. Thank you so much. Maybe you stuck around and you were just curious. You wanted to hear the whole story. You wanted to hear what my experience was like. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this story can be inspiring. It can be insightful. It can be, hopefully you got something out of it. I don't know, but that's my story. By the way, I guess I didn't mention it. So it was a thalamic stroke that I had, on my right side. So that's why my left side was weak. There goes the camera again. Thalamic stroke, right-sided stroke. So the left side of my body was experiencing the symptoms. And after looking into it a little bit more, like, hey, what does the thalamus do? The thalamus is like at least partially, if not fully, in control of your personality. And I'm like, it's a good thing that we caught that really fast. Otherwise, I'd probably be a different person. Yeah, thanks, God. Thanks for helping us. Thanks for putting us in an apartment like 5 minutes from a hospital. So that was, big blessing there. All right, I'm going to shut up. So thanks for listening. Since I suppose this is going to be a podcast episode and probably a YouTube video, but so I should probably sign off as such. Alrighty. Thank you. If you've listened this long, you're a real one. Love you. Look at your life. You're worth being well. Love you guys. Bye.